Alexander Lamont is an English designer known for his organic and tactile product designs that are deeply rooted in touch. With experiences relating to decorative arts, Alexander explores the depth and substance of materials, highlighting the artisans and crafts methods that are ingrained in the process. In the end, his designs are infused with unique vitality, soul, and character that come on a journey of discovery. And today we are joined by Alexander himself to discuss exactly that, about crafting designs that are rooted in culture and process. So glad to have you here with us.
My pleasure.
Will you tell us about your background and about the studio?
Sure. So I was born in England, but 6 weeks after I was born, moved to Kenya with my mum. My dad was already there, and there was not much around. There was a garden in Kenya. We lived 30 miles outside Nairobi, and I would play in the garden with the pond. We had some ducks, we had mud, we had grass, So what I feel created a great sort of energy from that experience was when you go out of that kind of blankness into the world, then there's a huge energy of fascination and curiosity and hunger to see this sort of other things. That's how it feels a little bit. It was like a fire was built and stoked through a kind of simple beginning. And then after we moved to England, we also lived in an area in the southwest of England, Somerset, very quiet, agricultural, in a small village. Again, the sort of place that's very beautiful, but you'd say nothing really happens there. Mm. And so when we would go with these trips later on, when my dad wasn't working with he'd started a small business when I was about 7, all related to handicrafts. It was called Global Village Crafts, the company. So that gives you a sense of what he was doing. It was from his experience traveling in Kenya and Asia. What can I do that will take me back to those places? This was his thought, that will take me to these beautiful objects that I saw in these places. I'll start a business, Global Village Crafts, that will be aimed at raising money to fund publications of intermediate technology. So that is also growing up in that business. The business lasted for 20 years, a fantastic education in design and surfaces, I would say, more than craft, because we would receive things in wooden crates. I can remember clearly before the time of containers, everything arrived in a wooden crate. Nothing was in a container. These crates would be stacked in a ship, and then containers came and you'd buy a container. But we'd have to jemmy open these crates, and nearly always the packing material was local newspapers. Nobody was wasting money on buying special wrapping paper. So from Thailand, they would come with this beautiful script on it and pictures, and from southern India, it would come with a completely different script and different paper. Just that alone had you open these things and you would smell something about the place was coming out. The smell of the materials, smell of something of India or something, and always good, never a bad smell. And so that's a very tactile thing. Opening the newspaper, lifting something out. Nearly always they were small. In the beginning it wasn't furniture so much, and you would be completely in touch with this thing. And when you touch something, it's very different. If we're allowed into museums and we're allowed to touch everything, then the experience is quite different than looking through a glass case. And my experience of that over all these years of unpacking and touching and looking, so where's this come from? What is this? What's it made of? My dad would explain to me, this is papier-mâché from Mexico. These are thorn carvings from Nigeria. And this is Dokra bronze from India. And you do that enough times, you kind of, they're very recognizable, because not only is the material expressing something, but there is a huge craft tradition and history and sort of socio-cultural meaning behind what we were importing at that time. And so now I'll jump ahead. I went to university. I studied Thai language and social anthropology. This to me was a sort of a next step of, okay, what I'm interested in more is the academic side, the study of culture, the systems of small societies and their marriage and their social organization and all of the aspects. And it turned out after university that I felt, well, the material culture aspect of this, which is all about this creation of what cultures make, was what most interested me. And over the next few years, I worked with my dad after university because it was a bad time in the economy. So I had to go home and I had to work and with him. And in this regard, I was given a special job to run a carpet company. And from that, I had a sort of understanding that I had this interest in craft, really a love for it, and also quite a good business sense. Like I kind of could see what sold and how to sell it and how to get kind of energized in that way. So I'm kind of dragging the story out of it, but I'm trying to be brief because there's big chapters to it. And we ended up, after that company struggled actually. So despite my saying I'm good at business, that business was probably never going to do that well. So we left to Hong Kong because my wife was a lawyer. She had studied Chinese and law while I had been studying Thai and anthropology. And she got a job in a law firm and I followed her and eventually found a job in an antique gallery in Hong Kong, which gave me 5 years selling absolutely beautiful Chinese antiques, furniture mostly, and Southeast Asian antiques, all sorts of sculpture. I also brought carpets to that company, which were only from the Caucasus and Turkey, which meant trips just to Istanbul to get those. And silver from Burma, another whole kind of group of products that I hadn't worked with in England. They were antique, they were a different kind of less handcraft, more the refined crafts of those areas. At the end of 5 years in Hong Kong, which is a wonderful time with a lovely gallery, lovely company called Oldfield Gallery that's still there, I had to think, what do I want to do now? I'm 30 years old. What has all this led to? And with the encouragement of a very good friend, who's the owner of the gallery in Hong Kong, I decided to start a business in Thailand, which had a number of possible directions, because but actually the business plan I'd written was very much like what we ended up doing. I thought that at that point, design had become much more central. You know, trade fairs had existed for many years at that point, and trade fairs were about what are we going to bring to the next one. You know, there's a kind of pressure of a need for new collections and things. And as design moves forward and people see more things, then the traditional crafts in some ways struggle, which is why you have the disappearance of so many crafts that without new design, then the skills which were used to make those things often are left by the wayside. I can see so many in Thailand where, partly as a result of the success of tourism, the numbers of people coming tended to put a pressure on producers to say, well, we need a lot more. You may have been making those wood carvings like that really well, but you know, we want to buy 100 times the quantity. Same with the lacquer, same with these other things. So a beautiful thing like Chiang Mai lacquer, which used to be a black layer covered with a red layer, number of red layers, and then this lovely pattern scratched into it, become spray on lacquer and a pattern which comes out of a tube with glitter saying, welcome to Chiang Mai. That's literally one thing was left and one thing took its place. And it's normally not something better that takes its place. And very sadly, so many of those craftspeople, I think probably at that time, 80s, 90s, were just being told all the time, your stuff's too expensive, nobody wants it, it's not, we can't sell it. And they would have just gradually given up. And because there wasn't the, there weren't enough, I would like to think if I was there, then I would say, this is what I know, this is what we will do with that craft. Yes, the traditional design is not what is so interesting right now to this market, but I know what is. And as long as the skills are remaining, then we can always go back and make those traditional designs. Yeah. But we need to find, you know, new angles. That's kind of what I think I do. So then after Hong Kong, coming to Thailand, my business plan really said I wanted to work with great crafts and bring new designs, great craft skills, great techniques, great materials. Mm-hmm. And that is what I've been doing for the last 23 years. I didn't originally envisage that I would be building my own workshops. I thought I would work with artisans, which we still do wherever we can. I definitely don't want to do more myself, but we do have many crafts under the roof of the studio that we make ourselves that we just could not source anywhere else. Partly because we develop them ourselves, partly because the people that we are buying from either closed or they couldn't make our quality. So that has been the sort of fuel to grow the company, that we have been really mastering skills and materials, particularly these things, and bringing great design together with them.
That's amazing. So how is such an inspirational background and upbringing of yours, how are they translated to the products that you make, to the designs?
You always have a choice with any product in terms of the materials you're going to bring to it. And I start with this feeling that if you think about everything around you, everything that's in the room where you're in now, all you're seeing is the skin. You're not seeing what's behind the wallpaper or the paint. You're not seeing what's behind the top layer of the stone. Whatever it is, it's just that surface. Now, those surfaces, therefore, are everything. Mm-hmm. And it's really only a millimeter. It's all within a millimeter. I mean, unless it's under glass or something, it's pretty much. Now, how interesting can a millimeter of depth be, or half a millimeter? That's really the question to me. And there's certain materials that I look at and just think, yeah, it's like the universe is contained in that skin. Something exceptionally beautiful. Normally it's happened through nature. Also it happens through the application of skills and hands and layering, like lacquers and things. But the possibilities are huge in that millimeter. Now, many designers would think, I want to make this incredible form, very form-led. And they're like, well, we could make it in metal, we can make it in wood, we can make it, the focus is on that form. And my focus has been on that millimeter, to make sure that what we're working with it has this, to me, transcendent skin. That's what I'm looking for, really. Mm. And I think that because I think of all that you're saying about how's that background, and all of that time when I was little, touching this stuff, as a 7-year-old or an 8-year-old or as a 9-year-old, to see something that you think, wow, that's made by hand, is not many people's experience growing up. When you're seeing so much, But that was like, well, if I'm going to start a business, or I'm going to start a studio and I'm going to employ people and we're going to make something, I don't want to make something second rate. I'll go to somebody else's factory for that. I want to make something which is as good as I can make it, to put it simply. Not the second best thing, really, really the best thing. And so we started with this material called shagreen, which is stingray skin, which is a material which has been used in Asia for probably the last 1,000 years, but well documented, at least 600 years, for all sorts of things. The stingray, you're in Indonesia, you may not know that Indonesia is the biggest consumers of stingrays in the world. I mean, obviously you're a huge country and you have huge seas everywhere. So seafood is massively important. Stingray is probably being caught and eaten throughout all of those thousands of islands every day. Not many of those people who are catching them will remove this skin on the back of the stingray. Mostly it'll just be like when you have a prawn, you know, you have a prawn, you throw away 50% of it. Many people don't eat the skin or the tail. I mean, they're not going to eat the tail, they're not going to eat the head of a fish. There is always a kind of waste element to all foods in a way. Even the wheat has a, you know, an ear at the top, and then you have all of the straw and the husk and everything. And that skin was our first material because I had seen it in books, and I'd seen it when I started to be interested. I went to the Musée des Arts Décoratifs in Paris, and it was closed. But I went in and asked them, do you know anybody that deals with this material? Because I know you have a big part of your collection of it. And they introduced me to somebody who had written the 2 books on shagreen, who lived in Paris. Very fortuitous moment in the development of the studio, because I went to see Jean Perfettini. We talked about shagreen. He showed me shagreen. He showed me about the book that he'd written, 2 books he'd written. I mean, he's the world authority on it. And then he agreed to come to Thailand and teach the people who, I then had to find people for him to teach because we had no studio. I said, if you're going to come, I'm going to start my workshop. And we got the first 3 people. And that's sort of the beginning of it. And I've just been chasing these materials. And I think I look and I go to shows wherever I can. I'm searching for special surfaces. And mostly new developed materials are related to plastics, let's say, resins. Because obviously the way that people are trying to make things is to make quicker materials, quicker methods, take the hands out, take the people out, try and find something that you can put through some process. And now what you get at the end of that is quite different from a natural material with its own tone and color and character. Each one being slightly different from the next one. And, or if you have, I'm just going to grab this thing to show you. This is a vase, which is cast from a big cantaloupe melon, which gives us this skin. We kind of get the skin of the cantaloupe, and then we apply all sorts of different subtle tones of color to it. And then when you sand through those colors, you reveal something. You're never quite sure what you're going to reveal. But, you know, you get certain areas which are darker just because of that way that the hand has sanded them. This is something very unique. So if we tried to make 2 identical, they would have a very different feeling, like 2 works of art next to each other. And I feel that if I compare this to a square canvas, which is what most painting is, with oil paint, same medium put on by different, of course, I understand the beauty and interest of that. But to me, this is as interesting, as unusual, as refreshing, but I can also hold it, I feel it in my hands. So it has more of a closeness to me than a square up on the wall, looking down at me. It's kind of beside me. And this is sort of the spirit of the Japanese craft move. You know, Japan is the one country really where craft and art are the same. Yeah, it's not so wabi sabi. It's names just escaped me. There's a whole movement behind this craft movement, which is really looking at craft completely equal to art. In most other cultures, like art, this great thing that somebody used a brush and painted a picture of something, but the craft is sort of more lowly. Whereas in Japan, that lowliness is like, yes, but these are pieces which live with us and have the same respect and beauty. That's kind of hopefully the answer to your question.
Yeah, no, that's really cool and interesting though. Within that, millimeter, there comes a challenge of how do you showcase craftsmanship, but for you, it also becomes an opportunity because with your background and all your experiences, you can really highlight it through that even small avenue. So
Yeah.
what aspects of craftsmanship or decorative arts that you resonate with the most or wish others would adopt more of?
I think maybe I answered that question a bit in the last answer, because what resonates with me is this. I think of it as three. Everything I'm making has three sides to it. One is the form, which I will normally be the designer, or we work with other designers. But the form could be a simple box. So in that box, there's not really a great form. We're not looking to recreate the box. Sometimes we are, sometimes we're not. Same with the tray. Sometimes we want a tray that you look at and say, well, I've never seen a tray like that before. Sometimes we don't. So number one, there's a form element to it, which most people designing are thinking is like the number one. That's the most important thing. Secondly, you have the materials you're going to use. Like I said, to me, the material is very important. The brand, in a way, is understood to work principally with these materials, which, while being historic, have actually gone through many phases of refreshing, reimagining. So things which, like the stingray I was talking about, which was first used in China, later used in Japan in a very different way, later used in Korea on furniture in a very pictorial way, used in England to wrap medical boxes and binoculars and all these scientific equipment. And then in France in the 1920s, suddenly became a more decorative material, kind of back from Japan being a decorative material. So it's already gone through all these different developments. Now you could have in your mind, well, that's old stuff. We're not interested in old stuff. We're only interested in new. Well, that material, which has been reimagined so many times over 1,000 years, still has its intrinsic beauty. I see it as my job to reimagine it again for the 21st century. I have to do that to keep it relevant, to show this most precious group of materials, which can be put alongside more modern materials, and people decide. But what we do know about the materials I'm working with, because they're natural, because we know how to make them, because we can see examples of them in museums in Europe and Asia mostly, is that they get more beautiful as they get older. If they're well looked after, then a 300-year-old shagreen or lacquer box in Japan is quite different from when it was first made. And if you look at even the Art Deco furniture from the 1920s and 1930s, which there are some amazing examples in the Musée des Arts Décoratifs, something happens to this stingray skin. It starts off, you could imagine it as like milky, and gradually over time, it becomes transparent, still retaining its sort of dye, its color, it's like whatever was done to it. And the individual beads, the stingray is made up of thousands and thousands of tiny enamel beads, same as your teeth, same as elephant ivory, super strong, and they protect the stingray. And over time, they sort of soften and polish. And so if you compare that to most modern materials, they do not grow more beautiful as they get older. Most resins will become opaque and they will lose whatever shine they started with. If they get damaged, it can't be repaired, whereas these can easily be repaired. We have countless examples of pieces being repaired, looking more beautiful. So there is that. There's a sort of quality to it. So there's firstly, well, I'm just giving you the three: form, materials. Then thirdly is the craftsmanship. You got the material, how do you work it? how do you use it in a way that will make sure that it can grow more beautiful with age? And I'm just trying to put those three together. That's what inspires me.
It's cool. And then how do you involve emotion and tactile senses in your practice as well? I think that's also part of what can make a product intriguing.
Well, I'm probably unusual in saying that the materials I'm working with give me the same emotional reaction as paintings do to other people. So I see, if I look at an interior, I'm looking at what's on the tables quite often. I'm looking at what's the table made of, the materials themselves. So then I want to make things that respond to my own loves, emotions in that way, and hope that other people like them too. You know, I can only trust really what I love. So if I want to work with surfaces that I think have authenticity, that are not, like, I wouldn't work with alligator skin, for example, because that's a material where animals are bred for their skins. Stingray is one of the very important foodstuffs in Indonesia and Malaysia. It's much lower cost per kilo than many of the other fish in the market. And probably only a small fraction of the skins are preserved, taken off to be able to be used for craft. Most of them are lost, you know, they're just thrown away with the bones and things. So there's an integrity to the material. It is a genuine byproduct of very important food stuff. I'm only talking about sugar. I could talk about all the other materials. I mean, another one is straw. Straw is in our workshop. We have many people working with straw marquetry. The straw is rye straw, from like where you have rye bread, and because the rye straw grows taller than wheat and barley and other straws, and it has a natural cellulose on the outside. So I look at that material as the French decorators look to that material and just think that has the most wonderful reflectivity. You know, I'll show you an example here. Examples. Because each little straw is going in a certain direction. So as you move it, the light is caught by other directions. And we've just dyed the straw in different colors to enhance that. And you get this like fantastic movement of light. And you can imagine this on big walls and furniture and things. So I look at that, and there are things made like this with vinyls to try and get something of this effect. And you may have to see them side by side to see the difference, but there is such a world of difference. I mean, it's like plastic or natural, beautiful. You know, it's sort of like if you can imagine a machine-made bread and a very good artisan sourdough bread with a kind of lovely crust and everything. I mean, they're kind of bread. They're both bread, and obviously there's big budgetary issues, which is why not everybody can cover their wall with handmade materials. But on that point, I never set out to build a studio to make expensive products. I have just been chasing things that I thought were as good as I could make, as beautiful as I could find. And that's a worthy pursuit, you know, for my life, to be really in search of these things and to learn all about the details of them. Very emotional, sometimes emotionally damaging, because it's hard work, but worth the effort. Anything really good is worth the effort.
Yeah, I believe. Maybe through sharing one of your product lines and about the process behind it, I'm curious, how might a product evolve organically throughout the process, maybe from the intention to the final product after layers of iteration?
Well, yeah, it's probably quite a orthodox process. I sketch, every day. I would say maybe 1/4% of things go beyond the sketching. Sketching is a sort of exercise just to be thinking about questions, techniques, certain forms. Certain things come back, keep coming back. Sometimes they come back for some reason that I'm not sure why. And so I could be finding myself drawing the same thing and still not able to work out how to turn it into a product. And by sketching, you are facing that technical question because you're trying to work out, well, how would that stand? How would that work? How would I, like one thing, I'm give you an example. I'm trying to do lamps without shades. So how do we make a lamp where the way that the light falls onto the stem or falls within itself or reflects within itself becomes the light completely, or even how there's the light exit the lamp, but you just don't have a bulb and a shade. So this is a kind of an interesting challenge, and it can take you, it takes me anyway, in all different ways of thinking about how light works and how I can work with these materials, how I can bring in new materials, and what would the surface that the light would reflect from be. So sketching, and then when something starts to become clear, then it goes into a board, call it a board of development product. These are things which kind of, we believe in their longer life, so we put it there. That will then have a technical drawing done to try and, because the drawings are quite, it's like if you look at fashion illustration, you know, the person is extended, the flows, the robes are flowing, there's a accentuation of this idea. That's what that's what I try and do with the sketch. I'm not being too technical with the sketch at the beginning. And but then when you have to go into the technical, like, okay, what are we really going to build here? Then you're translating the idea into real form, which often drains it of blood a little bit, I would say. You know, it's like the idea was perfect, but now we got to make it, and now we got compromises, and now we got to change this and that. So it's by the time the technical thing is finished, we know we can make it. Now it's just a process of, if we're using bronze, you know, most of our things have bronze in them somewhere, like, you know, bowls, big bowls, always using bronze with different textures. Bronze, we like make all sorts of, you can see over there a lamp standing in the distance. That's a tall thing. Whatever you can make with in 3D, you can make in bronze. So it's a lovely elastic material. And Thailand is, I think, possibly the best country in Asia for bronze. Been casting it nearly as long as China. The Buddhism required bronze continuously for hundreds of years. And anyway, so if the product has bronze, then we know how to make the bronze, we know how to make the wood. We have a wood workshop run by an English cabinet maker, very skilled cabinet maker, who would be able to work through that stuff. So then the making is, I would say, the most difficult thing in some ways, because to sketch something seems momentary. To do technical drawings is thoughtful, but then you have this 3, 4, 5, 6 months of developing all of the molds and the this and the that. And I maybe downplay the design point, because even though it's a moment where you suddenly, all those questions that were asked during the sketching, suddenly something comes, you're like, now I know what it is. Seems easy. But I feel with design that there's many times when people are asked to design, people who've done design degrees that I've worked with that have come through the studio and stuff, there's an ability to answer a question with a design that works. But like I was saying with this material, that I want to be really transcendent. I mean, I want this to be something that people look at who don't know anything about what I'm doing, who've had no interest in material, and they look at it and their mouths are open, drop. They want to touch it. It is something that is exceptional. So the form, this piece also has to sing rather than just work. You can draw tables all day that work. Yeah, they've got 4 legs, they've got a top, but now we want something that's going to meet with this material, meet with our ability, and somehow within the form just have this, like, that's it. That's what we're really, so that's all we're trying to do. And that whole process is a lot of parts that, if you start with a bad design, you're going to end up with a bad design. So finding that design at the beginning, or finding people that are very good designers, very important. It's hard to find, I think. Good design is hard to find.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah, I find it incredibly difficult.
So in what ways can designers highlight social aspects through product design?
On one hand, making things by hand is a social activity. If you come to our workshop, let's say you go to the straw room, there's maybe 40 people sitting there, quite quiet. The straw has a certain smell. Everybody is working on a certain panel, table, whatever, together talking. At the end of the day, they've covered a certain number of square inches, each person. They're aware of their skills, different people's skills, different people's speeds. A little bit like a kitchen, except it's not a hot, noisy place. It's a quiet, cool place. And that's kind of throughout the company. I find it like completely a social experience for me, like a lovely experience to walk into the workshop that I built over all these years and to talk to all the people making these products. So the absolute number one social impact is jobs that develop people's skills, that provide stability to families. And to me, that's the most important thing. Having gone through the experience of my dad's company going bankrupt when I was in my early 20s, it's a terrible thing. And so along with making nice things, there is a huge responsibility of businesses to be careful, to safeguard and be responsible for the people that work with them. And it's also a huge privilege to run a company like that. There's very few companies make it. Most really struggle and can't keep going. So I feel huge privilege to have this opportunity to work with all these people, to the thing that comes out of it at the end. Obviously it's a design company. We're about making beautiful things. So that is the kind of energy that unites us all in and understand and animates what we do. On another side, I want the products that we sell to have this same, because they're expensive products, it's kind of a little contradictory to say this, but maybe not. I think that things that go into the home that people live with are hopefully things that they love. They don't have to be expensive. They don't have to be special. You can form a deep connection to a piece of plastic your grandmother gave you, and that's something you never want to lose or anything. There's sentimental value to things. There's also something where within the beauty, quality, character of the piece, that it kind of lives with you. And I feel it's like how do you learn to spot the fakes from the real thing? Normally, people will say you have to buy a fake. You have to buy a fake, and for the clouds to leave your eyes. You fall in love with this piece. It's so beautiful. Look at that. The patina is perfect. Everything's perfect about it. You get it home, and then you realize the difference between that piece and the real pieces. It's a common thing, particularly with antique dealers, that it's that experience, that skill. So when you live with something that's truly good, that's beautiful, it somehow grows. It grows when it lives with you. This is my belief. Not a sort of mystical way. I think it's a very real way that a piece of art blooms in the interaction with the owner. Your love for it. Some people get a piece of art and they love it more and more, and it becomes, they look at it and it becomes sort of very soulful to their house and to their life, and they can talk about it. They can talk about why it's important. And so I want to make things that have that potential. I can't guarantee it, but I don't want to make things that people get and after a couple of months say, why did I spend that? Why did I buy that? I really want them to be like, well, we thought that was a lot when we bought it, but that was money well spent. And if this house ever catches fire, that's the piece I'm going to grab and take out with me. That's really how I want it to be. So when we're asked about sustainability and things, people put a lot of effort into recycling materials. Recycling materials means these materials have already been processed. They used up a whole amount of energy, and they've had to go through a destruction point to knock them down. And now they're going to go through a whole new energy, and they're going to be built. And quite often those things are not the most long-lasting things. So the chances are they're quite biodegradable, so that when they finally go into the pit, they're going to decompose and everything. That's kind of how we think of things. I would rather think that, if I go into a museum, I'm looking at things which may be thousands of years old, hundreds of years old. Ideally, I'm going to make something which won't need to be broken down, that uses materials really in a way that's respectful of the materials, and that this piece will last and last and last. And you won't be throwing it out and buying something else and throwing it out and buying something else. It has that quality to it.
Yeah.
And the thing that you're touching on that material isn't plastic, which is what mostly, even paints are full of plastic. So your environment is increasingly full of these things which are sort of sold as, I'm not damning the whole of this thing, but I'm just saying, like, so much of what we live with isn't going to last very long, wasn't made to last very long, wasn't made very well, uses materials and processes which are not, you wouldn't want to go to that factory. It's noisy, it's smelly, it's got fumes. It's like, if people could see how a lot of things are made, they may question it. So I would like to make these things not in big volumes, just what I can make in respecting those things which I think a social aspect. Sort of answers your question, I think.
Yeah, no, but I do agree there's no like magic formula for sustainability. The other day we had also a designer that says making something sustainable is making something that emotionally connects to people. And I do believe in that, because if the people who will be consuming it feel deeply connected to the products, they'll keep it for a long time. So it'll prevent them from throwing it away, just like you said just now. So lastly, how do you see design as a way to connect mindfully with a spectrum of time? We've been talking about time, old product and new product, and also with a spectrum of people.
Well, what comes to mind is the fact that we are making things which are slow to make. To make something well, you need to think about it. You need to prepare things, many things for each product. Even the lacquer, we mostly use natural lacquer, which doesn't dry, it cures, takes about a week for every layer to cure. Then we have to sand every layer. But we're in an environment where time is very pressing on projects. People who are designing for the projects, probably through no fault of their own, don't have much time. You know, they're pressed by the client. They all want it quickly, and so most of the market is doing its best to answer that. You know, make production line things. But at this level, when we are making mostly custom things for interior design projects, certainly in the furniture side, on the wall covering side, then to manage that, you're making a custom product, it's never been made before. So there's technical, structural questions about it. And you're giving a time frame long before you're trying to estimate the time that it will take, while the client is saying they only have half of the time, you know. So that time, just the concept of time is a real hard part of the business, because lead times, the market wants lead times to come down. At the same time, I feel we are at the end, or at the front, sorry, of this process of development of all these materials. So bronze was possibly cast for the first time 5,000 years ago in China. Lacquer possibly 2,000 years ago. And all of these materials have a provenance of at least many hundreds of years. So to feel within that arc of history, using things and still looking at them afresh and still finding them beautiful is kind of behind the scenes very motivating, inspiring, and fascinating. You know, if I read books on Chinese history, I think of this world going on around them. I read quite recently the history of porcelain, and porcelain was first developed in a town called Jindajian in central China, Jiangxi province. And so I went twice to this town, and having read the book about it and how the Chinese developed it, but they wanted to keep it a secret from the West. So they kept on there'd always be these Westerners going there, trying to find the secret of porcelain. And the Chinese would kind of throw them these red herrings to put them off, knowing that it was really the kaolin from the mountain nearby where all the clay came from that was really the crucial aspect. It wasn't the firing times, and it wasn't the kind of beating in powdered gold into the clay and all these things. It's kind of a funny story. But so you have the political stage, and then you have this world of craftsmen and artisans and guilds and all of this fantastic. To me, that's it's part of the history of these pieces that is hopefully going to continue to interest younger generations of designers. Because I feel in the past, designers would have had, as part of their training, visits to mills to learn about how fabrics are made. You know, a lot of physical exposure to these things. But it sounds like they spend most of the time in front of computer screens, and much less time really understanding that this kind of history of materials, which is really what the decorative arts is about, what the interior is about. And certainly in fine interiors of the past, couple of hundred years, the interior designers have been absolutely connoisseurs of these arts. They know what they are, they know how to use them, they know how to integrate, because they've learned about them, and they've been exposed to them, and they love them themselves. So if you don't see so much of them, it's a risk to the continuation of things, because it's much easier to choose what's available, drop it into a 3D plan and job done, and so I don't know. I mean, I'm a bit worried about the continued life of these things, but hopefully there'll always be enough designers who put in that time and effort to learn about the things that the reasons things have been used in the past, and the uniqueness of those things.
Yeah, I do agree. It's something that needs to be preserved, and it's something from the past, from a long time ago. We don't want to lose it, and we're thankful for people like you who are now at the forefront of not only doing, but also educating people to think, through the products that you make, to preserve culture and tradition through design. So overall, we love learning about your design philosophy, your background, and also about your products. That I love that every product can tell so much story and touch people in so many ways. Although most people see products first through an image or just by the visuals, it is designs that transcends, like we said earlier, having certain sentimental value makes you be able to grow with the product, and also maybe learn more about the storytelling aspect and the process behind it too. So yeah, really thankful for this conversation, and thank you so much for your time today.
My pleasure. Thank you very much. Lovely to meet you.